slept with 100 guys in under 24 hours, recorded a documentary about it. Everything's going viral right now. I mean, just for you, Dr. Borse, like, what were your just initial reactions to this, just hearing this story and seeing it?
Well, I think honestly, when you forwarded me that specific portion of the topic that we were going to be talking about, I was not aware of it, because I know of OnlyFans, but I'm not really sure, and I'd like you to unpack this for our audience. I'm sure there are people, or just unpack it for me, how it works. My impression is it's a place where people do go and prostitute themselves by advertising that they will, for a fee, perform for you in a way that you want them to perform. Is that correct?
Yeah. And for the record, I've never, not to put myself on a pedestal or anything, but that was never something that I really struggled with,
right,
on my end. But yeah, I think you basically summed up OnlyFans pretty well.
But when I read an article that was, I think, published by the Federalist, that was simply a reaction to the whole thing, and it just saddened me. It saddened me a great deal. One, because, my thought was, oh, okay, so a 23-year-old woman, she's been convinced somehow by the culture that she has grown up in that this is the way to take ultimate control and command of her own self-determination. And how did we get here? And then my other thought was, wow, nothing's new under the sun.
Right.
In the sense that, this is not really different than the old by comparison to now, I guess, peep show booths that operated. It's just that it's just served up with technology, and it's made easier.
Right.
So it's more seductive. And when you overlay all of that with the idea of, that it's an expression of human agency and the transactional nature of all of it among consenting adults, you can see it. You can see why somebody might adopt this view. And then when you add to that mom is operating as her financial manager, I'm thinking, I wish Kale was here tonight, because we'd have a whole conversation, we still can, about like where feminism went off the rails. I mean, it's amazing, because it was mounted as a movement to say that everything that's wrong with culture in the world is the commodification of women in the marriage market, to the only way I can win is by commandeering that market and commodifying myself. So it's
for the pleasure and the desire of the man, still the patriarchy.
Right. I mean,
which is crazy.
Yeah. So it's like, wow, that was a neat trick you pulled off there, patriarchy. You finally convinced women
Right.
to just go along with it. And
yeah.
I've always said this about slavery too. If I was a racist and I wanted to keep brown people where I wanted to keep brown people, I'd just give them money. And it seems to me that we're talking about the same thing here.
Yeah. And maybe let's expand upon that a bit, because, I oftentimes talk about this, and it's part of my logo, right? It's breaking free. It's breaking free of the bonds of pornography in our lives. I think you mentioned slavery. And, when I think about this, I do think of a certain slavery of the mind and of the soul, right? We're slaves to our own desire, to lust. Also slaves, I think, just to medicating or to avoiding unpleasant realities about ourselves, unpleasant feelings. At least for me, and I talk about this on my podcast a lot, like porn for me, when I look back at it through therapy and through recovery groups, all of that stuff, ultimately, I think it was something I was hooked on as a kid, because of course it's alluring, and, naked women, all that stuff is going to draw you in. But the real thing about it is it's a way to cope with pain. If I'm feeling pain, I'm going to be coping with it with porn, with going to these images, going to these sites. And I think what I'm seeing now, and sorry if you can hear my dog in the background, I apologize about that. But I think what we're seeing now, right, is we're seeing this proliferation of media, right, of attention grabbing. Everything's trying to go after your attention, right, online. Any type of market that you look at, any type of, I would say, vector of life, someone's trying to get your attention. Someone's trying to hook you in through media, through apps, through technology. And I think what's happening is it's kind of like this nasty cycle of where I think men and women are both feeling that sense of isolation, because they're growing up with this stuff. Like for me, like growing up with porn, you start to disassociate yourself in that sexual experience to where you almost have like two different boxes that you're compartmentalizing things. Like you have like your real life, and then you have like your porn life on the other side. And as a kid, I feel like in growing up, and maybe somebody as an adult even that might not realize this, is you can't just separate these things. Like there's no separation. Like to live, I think, in fullness, and to live truly, I think, without fooling yourself or tricking yourself, you can't have that separation. And I think where there is that separation, I think it's hard for the sexes to feel like they trust each other, to feel connected. I think men have a certain viewpoint of women, women have a certain viewpoint of men. And then I think this online market of sex and selling ourselves and buying that, right? Because it's not just like one person, right? It's not just the women putting their bodies, for sale. It's also the men, of course, which no one wants to talk about. It's the men that are driving the demand for this, right? The men, by far are the ones that want to see this, that are paying for it. Maybe not with money, but with their attention, right? With eyes on it. So I think for me that like the isolation is just being driven, the voids is being driven larger and larger. And I think something like this situation here, I think perfectly just encapsulated just how messed up this is all getting. And like you said, it's not like this is new. Like this has happened before. Like I heard about the statistic of the world record because there's like a gangbang conference every year in like Poland. And it's just like, what is going on? But it's not like that just started, since the iPhone was created. Like that's been around for millennia, right? But now you have access to it at the click of a button. If you're curious, or if a friend comes over and shows you something. Like I was exposed to that kind of stuff like when I was a kid. And like, what does that do to your brain?